This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Thanks so much for coming out. Welcome to the Raymond Danowski Poetry Library Reading Series, Season 6, hard to believe, Duets. We're fortunate tonight to have with us Matthew and Michael Dickman, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a minute. My name is Kevin Young. I'm the Atticus Haygood Professor of Creative Writing and English and curator of the literary collections in the Raymond Danowski Poetry Library. Before I introduce the Dickman Frere, I want to give thanks to the Hightower Family Fund, to Marble, and Creative Writing who helped make this possible, as well as all the people it takes on the ground to regularly bring you these writers in a series over these past 6 years and over these past months, which we love having, and it's free and open to the public, so I really want to thank them. From Ginger Kane, the acting director of Marble, Maureen McGavin in public programming, Christine Frazier in Marble, Julie Delaquanti and John in the Shatton Gallery who design all our publicity, Richie Hoffman who's newly working on the reading series, and Amy Hildreth, my researcher, who helps with the pulling of books to show them. We had a fun afternoon looking at some of the treasures in the Raymond Danowski Poetry Library. Let's give all of them a round of applause, please. Relax your mind and let your conscience go free and get down to the sounds of EPMD. This lyric from the start of You Gots to Chill by EPMD reminds me of Matthew and Michael Dickman, not just because we were talking last night and in their visit to my class today about the pleasures of first hearing that hip-hop group, and not just because MD stands for microphone doctor, as well as it might stand for Michael or Matthew Dickman. Instead, it's because the cool sound, the fractured funk that EPMD made their trademark and made visible, or should I say hearable, you can also hear in the Dickman's work. Because Michael and Matthew seem to me in their lyrical poems to conjure the sense of sound and the sound of sense, respectively. Which is to say, they are interested in the how of a poem as much as the why, and through that take us wherever they choose. And mostly it's because they both say wow when you show them some of the great books in the Raymond Danowski Poetry Library. And that's sort of the same feeling you have, at least I had, first hearing You Gots to Chill. And it's also their unabashed, not chill at all, love of the book as a unique object, which extends to their lives as poets and as collectors themselves. When you read their books, even their first books, Michael's The End of the West and Matthew's All-American Poem, you can feel the power of the book as a unique thing. You can see labor and love, whales and My Father Full of Light, the Black Album and Scary Parents, and Some of the Men, which, as one of their friends said, are also women. What you don't see is attentiveness or timidity, the smallness that can sometimes persist in our poetry, in our teeny tiny fonts, printed lightly so as not to disturb. The poems of the brothers shake and rattle and rock and root and roll. But I've been speaking of them as if they are a unit, or their poetry is. And though I find the fact that they were, and they write about this, so I'm not spoiling it, breach and transverse in utero, utterly fascinating, it is their poetry I return to again and again. Like their many readers, I am looking forward to their second books, a daunting prospect for any writer's second book, the follow-up, both of which are now quickly forthcoming. Michael's Flies will be out next month, right, from Copper Canyon Press, and it's won the James Laughlin Prize for a second book. If it's anything like the poems of his I've seen in the New Yorker and elsewhere, it'll be vibrant yet spare, stark and yet filled with care in their quietude. Matthew's Mayakovsky's, is it Pistol? Revolver, even better. I knew it was something better than I could come up with, but it was late when we discussed it. Mayakovsky's Revolver will come out next year from Norton. It, too, I'm eagerly awaiting, not least of which for the poem Coffee, which appeared in the American Poetry Review. Understated, yet colossal, haunting, yet filled with expectation in its form, if not its subject. It is poems like his and theirs that give us hope for American poetry. I want to say, too, that their poems, not those poems, but two unique poems, ones that they've given to us, that we have the honor of publishing for the first time, are in a unique broadside. There's only 150 copies of. That is, I think, many people are saying it's the best broadside of the series. It's beautiful that both poems are sort of printed back to back. And it's for sale in the lobby, such as it is out there, after the reading and before, if you got a chance to do it. And those are $10 for students and $20 for everyone else. It's no wonder that I've selected poems by each of them for the Best American Poetry 2011 out this fall. Their work, which you have the pleasure of hearing tonight, is among the best we have. It does more than make you want to sing along or bob your head like EPMD or any of the other musicians they admire do. Their work is above all moving, which may be my simplest and highest praise. Ladies and gentlemen, first Matthew, then Michael Dickman.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much, Kevin. It's an honor to be here. And thanks to Kevin and thanks to Emory and to Marble. It was an amazing day spent in the collections. Everyone was so grand and nice, and both of us saw books that I don't think we'll ever see again unless we're invited back, which may or may not happen depending on how this reading goes. So I'm going to read to you for about an hour and a half, some from All American Poem, just a couple poems, and then some new poems from Mayakovsky's Revolver. The first poem I thought I would read out of All American Poem is, so we've been talking about, Kevin and I were talking about elegies and how important they are in our lives. And this is a poem that I wrote when I was living in Austin, Texas, and I had bought a Chick Corea album. For those of you who don't know, Chick Corea is a jazz pianist. And I bought his album, and I came home, and I bought some whiskey, and I came home, and then I was sitting in my room drinking whiskey by myself. I'm an adult. I can do what I like. And, listening to this album and just sort of getting sad. Strangely, the more whiskey I had, the sadder I was. And I wrote an elegy for him, I was just wondering, where the hands go when they're gone, And showed it to my brother, and he thought, well, that's a pretty good elegy, he said. But then 3 days later, I was sitting at the kitchen table, and my brother came over and slammed down the newspaper. And it was opened on this full print ad that said that Chick Corea was in town that weekend performing. And Michael said, you can't write elegies about people who aren't dead, that it's really bad luck, and you need to change it. Chick Corea is alive and well, which makes the elegy I wrote for him seem a little distasteful. Let me tell you, just because you see someone in a black and white photograph doesn't mean he's dead. Even if you find the photograph in an old-looking box inside your grandmother's closet, the person in it standing against an old Ford with a goat walking past and a farm in the distance, he may still be alive. In a nursing home, being fed by a large Kentuckian named Tony, but alive all the same. And it's the same with people much older than you. Just because they were buying cups of coffee for a nickel and listening to Sarah Vaughan live at the Blue Note, they're not always sleeping through their hangovers under a quiet blade of grass in God's acre. When I bought the Chick Corea album and saw him in the silvery sheen of the cover art, smoking an unfiltered cigarette, the smoke rising over his face like the hem of a silk dress, I didn't even blink. He was dead. And I was sad, listening to his fingers, his poor dead fingers flying like ghosts over "It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing," and thinking, this man's a genius, playing Ellington like a bartender plays a Singapore sling. All that maraschino cherry sweetness, a little clink of ice in his voice, doing a kind of mumble moan over the keys, like a man who's been raised from the dead, looking down at a woman's knees after years in the dirt, singing, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Yeah, this good, sweet life. Now some new poems for a moment. Mayakovsky's Revolver. I keep thinking about the way blackberries will make the mouth of an 8-year-old look like he's been shot in the face, or been given a birthmark so big because God's love for him is so big, he wants everyone to know. In the dark, I can see my older brother walking through the tall brush of his brain. I can see him standing in the lobby of the hotel alone, crying along with the ice machine. Romance keeps coming up in the conversations with people who have been fucked within an inch of their lives for the first 5 weeks and then left alone, their lover eating cereal in bed. Instead of the moon, I've been falling for the lunar light pouring out of a plastic shell I've plugged into the bathroom wall. Online, someone is claiming to own Mayakovsky's Revolver, which they will sell for only $50,000. Why didn't I think of that? Remove the socks from my dead brother's feet and trade them in for a small bit of change, a ticket to a movie, something with a receipt, something I can write off, proof that I was busy being alive, that I didn't stay in all night weeping, that I didn't stay up drawing a gun over and over, that I didn't cut out the best one I drew, or stood in front of the mirror, pulling the paper trigger until it tore away. This next poem's for Kevin. Coffee. The only precious thing I own, this little espresso cup, and in it a dark roast all the way from Honduras, Guatemala, Ethiopia, where coffee was born in the 9th century, getting goat herders high, spinning like dervishes, the white blooms cresting out of the evergreen plant. Ethiopia, where I almost lived for a moment, but then the rebels surrounded the capital, so I stayed home. I stayed home and drank coffee and listened to the radio and heard how they were getting along. I would walk down Everett Street, near the hospital where my older brother was bound to his white bed like a human mast, where he was getting his mind right and learning not to hurt himself. I would walk by and be afraid and smell the beans being roasted inside the garage of an old warehouse. It smelled like burnt toast. It was everywhere in the trees. I couldn't bear to see him. Sometimes he would call. He wanted us to sit across from each other, some coffee between us, sober. Coffee can taste like grapefruit or caramel, like tobacco, strawberry, cinnamon, the oils being pushed out of the grounds and floating to the top of a French press, the expensive kind I get in the mail. The mailman with a pound of Sumatra under his arm, ringing my doorbell, waking me up from a night when all I had was tea, and watched a movie about the Queen of England, when Spain was hot for all her castles and all their ships carved out of fine Spanish trees went up in flames, while back home, Spaniards were growing potatoes and coffee was making its careful way along a giant whip from Africa to Europe, where cafes would become famous and people would eventually sit with their cappuccinos, the barista talking about the new war, a cup of sugar on the table, a curled piece of lemon rind, a beret on someone's head, a scarf around their neck, a bomb in a suitcase left beneath a small table. Right now, I'm sitting near a hospital where psychotropics are being carried down the hall in a pink cup, where someone is lying there and he doesn't know who he is. I'm listening to the couple next to me talk about their cars. I have no idea how I got here. The world stops at the window while I take my little spoon and slowly swirl the cream around the lip of the cup. Once, I had a brother who used to sit and drink his coffee black, smoke his cigarettes and be quiet for a moment before his brain turned its armadas against him, wanting to burn down his cities and villages, before grief became his capital with its one loyal flag and his face, perhaps only his beautiful left eye, shimmered on the surface of his Americano like a dark star. Got a couple other funny ones to read to you. Bummer. Okay, just one more kind of quiet one. And then a couple different kinds. This next poem is called Blue Sky, and it's along this theme of elegy that's come up for me in this second book. With an older brother and then, friends. And it comes out of this idea about whether your memory affects your grief later on. If that makes sense. You experience something and then your life moves on. And if how good your memory is, if that depends on your relationship with it still. Good, that's much more complicated than the poem. Blue Sky. I wonder if it matters that I can't remember her name. Although we kissed on my front porch in early August, and by late August had taken off our clothes in her backyard. I wonder if the two of us knew somewhere in a fingernail, a freckle, that I would grow up afraid of needles and the color white, or that she would fall from a window before taking the exam on 1980 feminism she had been studying all semester long, in love with bell hooks and a boy she met in her Shakespeare class. I wonder if it matters that she might have jumped. That when I dream about her, I dream she is hanging in a closet. I wonder if it matters, even to the closet, that someone else was hanging there and that she slipped or stood up all of a sudden, as we like to say, and walked up to the window and then stepped out of the window all of a sudden, but for the hours of sitting and the seconds of falling. I wonder if it matters that I loved her when I was 15, that her left breast had 3 freckles making a triangle of the nipple, or that she wrote a letter on my back with her finger so I could never read it and have only guessed what she might have been saying to me. This blue sky, our blue sky. This green grass, our green grass. This trembling, ours. I wonder if I'm bad for not caring, or for forgetting, or for only loving myself so long it's become hard to imagine the letters of her name. And then I think the world is like a crowded staircase full of midtown commuters all pushing and pulling, each dropping something important that they will not remember until it's too late. And then I think I'm an idiot for thinking the world could be a story I tell myself. But then I remember this thing. I'm standing on the top of a building. A friend is opening a beer for me. He says my name, and all of a sudden I'm wondering if it matters that I'm stepping up onto the flat head of a concrete gargoyle, looking down at the parking lot stories below. And now my friend is yelling my name rapidly with a question mark after each time he says it, and I remember blue sky, green grass. So this next poem's a love poem. Okay. To Jack Spicer. It was so great. We got to see some amazing books and chapbooks of Spicer's from the collection. If you have not gone to see these, go see them. They're amazing. And if you've not read Jack Spicer, you know, it's an exciting night for you, because you can go home and you can read Jack Spicer on the computer machine. So these next two poems, one is to Jack Spicer and one's to poet Bob Kaufman. The summer's over, Jack Spicer, and Paris, France is still Paris, France, though we've never been there together, but might if life were a little longer and no one ever invented knives. I'm crossing the bridge again, and the city is behind me, being rescued or being destroyed with a leaf on the end of a branch turning maple syrup brown. The first one. The summer's over, Jack Spicer, and I've turned up my collar against the wind, the health insurance, the clouds and blue jays, against the gangbangers and insufficient funds. It's getting colder. We're turning from wheat beers to stouts, becoming our Irish fathers again, our German uncles, bruising our knuckles against the tavern walls and young mothers. We're showing up for work. We're blessing the promise of ice and snow and football to come, like the Israelites did with the sand and gold and insects. It's raining, Jack Spicer, and I'm missing Marie and Inan, missing Lipman, who's walking through an alley in Boston. His beautiful hands and shoulders, his wife and daughter at home, his heart beating up his body like a heavy weight, the nose broken, the ribs broken. I'm not ready. Kiss me. Take your legs and make a belt of stars around me. Be my winter coat, my sobriety and bodega. The oceans are getting blue and the oysters are getting ready. Soon we can cover the table with newspapers, with the faces of our senators and crossword puzzles. The oysters spread out over the sports page. We can open the hard shells and slip the cold, soft bodies into our mouths. We can drink white wine and make a kind of Pacific out of lunch. I want to lie around the room with a pair of your dirty pants flung over a chair. I want to eat ice cream and have my older brother back. The summer's over, Jack Spicer, and all the waitresses are putting on their black tights like a funeral of knees. The bartenders are wiping down the brass. The waiters are drawing out their lines of cocaine like long strings of silk, white and pure and perfect. I have crossed the bridge into a Paris, France that doesn't exist. And really, I'm in Portland. The summer's over, and the last of the breweries are being pulled up into the sky, becoming lofts, getting rooftop gardens for surgeons and all their beautiful brides. Who reads Bob Kaufman? Awesome. So this corner is going to be bored tonight. But the rest of the room, oh man, Bob Kaufman. Oh, that's exciting. You guys are really going to fall in love. I made you dinner, Bob Kaufman, but you never arrived. You never called. And that's all right because I never really invited you. Only you were gone somewhere in the silent 70s and I was starving. I thought it would be nice to sit with you and eat oysters or boil some pasta and toss it in olive oil like a salad, a little vinegar, cherry tomatoes, some French fromage. I wanted to look across the table of bread and see you spreading the butter. A chicken breast or a bowl of cinnamon and chickpeas steaming up the space between us like a window, and it was nice. Your elbows on the table, my legs crossed, and the world outside, because it's always outside, having dinner on its own and talking politics and being sad because Paul Newman died, which makes me sad too. But at least I get to saute this garlic for you. At least I get to sear this cod, though you might be a vegetarian. I'm ruined. Come excavate me. There are old bones and jars down there. I just know it. If we were in Texas, we could eat migas and beans. We could run the hot seeds of a jalapeno over our tongues and kiss girls with skin the color of pintos. Let's leave our boots by the door. Let's listen to the rattlesnakes curl into a circle of dark. I want everything to do with you to do with honey and thistles and edible flowers like the ones arranged over mixed greens in California where bistros serve imported water and lemon from the freeways. I made you dinner, Bob Kaufman, and set the table with Dutch china, white and blue, country scenes and vines. I haven't eaten anything in 2 days. I take aspirin and whiskey at the same time. My body is a boxing ring. The kitchen is full of puff pastry stuffed with creme anglaise and dipped in chocolate, some of them with a little seed of sliced strawberry like a note that has been hidden inside the palace walls some prince might find long after he's king and the walls have finally crumbled around him. Bob, you are here but not here. The vegetables are all from the market, where the Russians and Poles are putting potatoes into paper bags, separating the bruised peaches from the sweet peaches, counting their money, forgetting their language, missing their popes and czars, and you are lifting a single ravioli to your mouth, and I am dipping the wide leaf of an artichoke into the aioli I made from scratch, because I don't have to be in hell if I don't want to be. So I'll just read 2 more poems. One about tomatoes. That used to be in this book. Oh, it leaves, it comes back. We were talking about titles today in Kevin's class, and I felt like I was just like no help. You know, Roma, it's about tomatoes. Thanksgiving poem, it's about Thanksgiving. Country music's about country music. So, if you have any questions, you can ask me later. Okay, Roma. Last night, my neighbor was looking a little enlightened, the way bodies do after spending the afternoon having sex on an old couch while responsible people are suffering with their clothes on in cubicles and libraries. Sorry, Kevin. He had that look vegetables get in really nice grocery stores where the tomatoes aren't just red, they're goddamn red. He was like that, like a glowing off-the-vine Roma, sitting in his living room picking pineapple off a Hawaiian pizza and telling me about his father who was a real motherfucker. I asked him if he still loved his dad, or if he loved him more now that he was dead. Sure, he says. I love anything that's dead. Someone's hand floats up onto the beach while the body is still lost below the current. A vase of lilacs turned brown, the black archipelago of mourners marching up the hill. My neighbor is there to greet each of them with a box of chocolates and a barbershop quartet in the background. When my father died, he says, opening a beer, he was no longer my father. He was no longer a man. It's easy to love things when they're powerless, like children and goldfish. This is the way with enlightened people. They say things that are so infuriatingly simple when the world is not. So I put down my Pepsi and I pull out the big card. What about Hitler, I ask? You can't love Hitler. My neighbor puts a piece of pineapple on his tongue like a sacrament, sucks the juice out of it, chews it up, then turns his head slow like a cloud and says, I can love anybody I feel like loving. And I say, that's ridiculous. And he says, what's ridiculous is that you don't. And there he is again, shining in the grocery store, pulling the bow off the heart-shaped candies and putting one softly into his father's mouth. So my last poem is actually about goldfish. Poor fuckers. Goldfish they get abused all the time. And rarely celebrated. So I thought I would celebrate some goldfish tonight, kind of in a way. We were also talking about some students had questions about like truth in poems. So this is maybe dedicated to him. Elegy to a Goldfish. Oh, I should say this is also on the broadside. Elegy to a Goldfish. I can't remember when my brother and I decided to kill you. Small animal with no school, bright and happy at the bottom, slipping through the gate of your fake castle. I think it was winter, a part of us aware of the death outside, the leaves being burned up and the squirrels starving inside the oaks, the sky knocking its clouds into the ashtray of the city like a gray finger on the tip of a gray cigar. And it might have been me who picked you up first, who chased you around the clean bowl of your life and brought you up into the suffocating elevator of ours, my heart becoming an empty room as I did it. And I want to say it was my brother who threw you against the wall like a drunk husband, the glowworm inch of you sliding down the English garden of wallpaper, and that it was me who raised my leg like a dog, me who brought my bare foot slamming down on your almost nothing ribs and felt you smear like a pimple. Now that's something I get to have forever. That Halloween candy-sized rage. That cough drop of meanness. And your death, only the beginning. The mushy orange autopsy reminded us of mandarins, navels, bloods, Persians, the sweet Valencia. And when the girl, who must have thought of you all day, and especially on recess, came home to find the emptiness of it all, the water in your bowl a centimeter lower for the loss of you. When my little sister's brain received the black letter of your death, the maybe 20 seconds it took for her to read it, and looked at us, my brother and I remember we started to laugh at her. And the laughing must have sounded like an arm being cut off, or like a mouth that was full of broken glass. And then it might have been me, though it could have been him, who thought to open the can of tangerines, who pulled one of the orange bodies out of the syrup and threw it at her, this new artificial you, chasing her around the house, screaming, "Eat him! Eat him!" But it was me who held her down on her bed. And it was him who forced her mouth open. And it was me who pushed the sticky fruit into her throat like a bloody foot into a sock. You had only been gone for 1 hour. And yet the sky outside turned black and red. The tree in the yard thrashed back and forth until its spinal cord broke. And my little sister, your one love, flashed white and pulsed like neon in a hospital, her eyes rolling back into the aquarium of her head. And in every country, countless deaths, but none as important as yours. Tiny Christ, machine of hope, martyr of girls and boys. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for coming. I sometimes wish, every once in a while, Matthew and I get to read together, and it's really exciting. But I wish he wouldn't read that poem right before I stand up, because I always expect shoes to come flying at me. It's a tough life for siblings. Our little sister, by the way, is pregnant and is going to have not one, but 2 little girls, twin girls. Say awesome. I mean, I just feel so bad for her. This poem is called We Did Not Make Ourselves. We did not make ourselves is one thing I keep singing into my hands while falling asleep. For just a second, before I have to get up and turn on all the lights in the house, one after the other, like opening an advent calendar. My brain opening, the chemical miracles in my brain switching on. I can hear dogs barking, some trees, last stars. You think you'll be missed. It won't last long, I promise. I'm not dead, but I am standing very still in the backyard, staring up at the maple. 30 years ago, a tiny kid waiting on the ground, alone in heaven, in the world, in white sneakers. I'm having a good time, humming along to everything I can still remember back there. How we're born, made to look up at everything we didn't make. We didn't make grass, mosquitoes, or breast cancer. We didn't make yellow jackets or sunlight either. I didn't make my brain, but I'm helping to finish it, carefully stacking up everything I made next to everything I ruined in broad daylight, in bright brain light. This morning I killed a fly and didn't lie down next to the body as we're supposed to. We're supposed to. Soon I'm going to wake up. Dogs, trees, stars. There is only this world and this world. What a relief, created over and over. And I'm going to grab a water. It's really nice to be here. It's a real pleasure. I'm glad everyone who's here is here. And it's really great to get to spend time with Kevin Young, who's a poet who I've read for a long time and really like a great deal. And in the spirit of that, and also in the spirit of this idea that we don't make ourselves, I thought I would read 3 poems that are based on other people's artwork. The first one is Emily Dickinson. Everyone ignore my brother. Like, if I say something and my brother starts giggling, you have to ignore him. You have to ignore him. I went to Emily Dickinson's house, and it was a very powerful experience for me. But before I read this poem, I'll just tell you that when I walked into the house, I turned into a 12-year-old boy. Okay, but then I quickly moved past that. Okay. Emily Dickinson to the rescue. Standing in her house today, all I could think of was whether she took a shit every morning or ever fucked anybody or ever fucked herself. God's poet, singing herself to sleep. You want these sorts of things for people. Bodies and the earth inside, instead of white nightgowns and terrifying letters. Here she comes, her hands out in front of her like a child flying above its bed. Her ankles and wrists held tightly between the fingers of a brightly lit parent, home from a party. Flying, her spine flying, singing, "Here I come," her legs pumping her heart out. Heaven is everywhere, but there's still the world. The world is cancer, house fires, and brain death here in America. But I love the world. Emily Dickinson to the rescue. I used to think we were made of bread, gentle work, and water. We're not. But we're still beautiful, killing each other as much as we can beneath the pines. The pines that are somebody's masterpiece. The next poem is about a painting by Barnett Newman. Barnett Newman, who made really, really strange minimal paintings with things that I think he called zaps, and wore bow ties all the time. And then the poem after this is about a photograph by Ralph Eugene Meatyard, which makes this the worst PowerPoint presentation, because you can't see anything. You have to imagine somehow. Barnett Newman, Black Fire. What I want more than anything is to get down on paper what all the shining looks like. All black all the time. Black petals, black leaves, black pulse. I like to sit in the corner and watch the light disappear with both my eyes. God doesn't have any eyes. Hurricanes, cotton mouths, lakes. The list goes on and on. Shit, gnats, and sunlight, but no eyes. The shivering from the maple leaves is something I can't stop talking about. I used to ride a slick black tricycle beneath the trees, but now I just walk or lie down and stare up at nothing, or lie down and stare up at nothing. The underside of the leaves covered in ants. My nightlight. The black pedals on my black tricycle look like wings. I put my feet on the wings and fly around the yard, avoiding dogs and worms. The stars are in the ground with my grandfather, smoking cigars and shining their asses off. Grandpa has to hunch over to fit under there, beneath the street lights and maple leaves, beneath the stars, worms. The light comes up through his teeth and the black grass. And this poem is based on a Ralph Eugene Meatyard photograph. Ralph Eugene Meatyard took these amazing black and white photographs of children, often wearing masks, and often the light in them, everything looks, it's all very shaky. I should be an art history teacher. Can everyone see that? Can you visualize? Because I did such a good job. Shaky? You can, okay. Ralph Eugene Meatyard, untitled. Is the light supposed to do that? I put on one scary mask after another and then hung them in the trees where they shined like giant floating jellyfish. Milk-filled condoms. Your mother's face. My brother is hanging from the branches, hanging or swimming. Our t-shirts absolutely blaze. This is why we think God is white. I am shaken in the trees. I am smeared. In one wilderness, my brother wears a plastic bag over his head and leaps from the barn door. In another, there's nothing but leaves and needles. Light burns the water off the tips of ferns. It looks like a seizure. Sometimes we just sit inside the barn with no heads at all and hold each other. That's the best time. No heads at all. My arms around him, his arms around me. The children are trees. My brother waves from the branches with both hands. A seizure in the solid green air. Relentless resurrection. First, I put on the mask that looks like my brother, then I put on the other mask that looks like my brother. My older monster. The light is puking pure white onto the ground. It can't help it. First, it cuts off your hand. Then it cuts off your arm at the elbow. I'll read another, I think there's time, so I'll read another poem that was taken or based on other art. It's called From the Lives of My Friends. The playwright and fiction writer Anton Chekhov had made a note that he wanted to write a novel called Stories from the Lives of My Friends, and he didn't get around to it. And I thought, great, because that's a great title. And so I'll use part of that. And then the other thing, you don't need to know this, it doesn't help, but when he died and his body was shipped to Moscow, you know, they shipped it in a refrigerated car that said oysters. Coming from the Northwest, that's like, what a good idea. From the Lives of My Friends. What are the birds called in that neighborhood? The dogs. There were dogs flying from branch to branch. My friends and I climbed up the telephone poles to sit on the power lines, dressed like crows. Their voices sounded like lemons. They were a smooth sheet. They grew black feathers, not frightening at all, but beautiful, shiny, and full of promise. What kind of light is that? The lives of my friends spend all of their time dying and coming back, and dying and coming back. They take a break in summer to mow the piss-yellow lawns, blazing front and back. There is no break in winter. I fell in love with the sisters of my friends, all that yellow hair, their arms blazing. They lick their fingers to wipe my face clean of everything, and I am glad. I am glad. I am so glad. We will all be shipped away in an icebox with the one word oysters painted on the outside. Left alone for once. None of my friends wrote novels or plays. From the lives of my friends came their lives. Here's what we did. We played in the yard outside after dinner, and then we were shipped away. That was fast. Stuffed with lemons. So I'd like to read you a couple more poems, two more poems. The first poem is called Birthday, which I like to read sometimes if I get. It's so lucky that my brother and I have spent our lives trying to make this art that you you don't get money or anything from. But what does get to happen sometimes is that we don't live in the same state, and so it's nice to get to see each other and hang out. And this is a poem called Birthday, which, as Kevin mentioned, we were breeched and transverse, which looks like this. And it was 1975, and so it was a C-section because everything was a C-section in 1975. I think if you had a cold, they would give you a C-section. And, I'll tell you also this. It doesn't matter, but once Matthew and I, we walked into the house and we kicked off our shoes like teenagers do, and our shoes landed like this. And our poor mother had to sit she couldn't get up for hours. This is a poem called Birthday, and it is about, Matthew and I have really good memories, and it's about when we were born. Birthday. The high, white rooms of St. Vincent's. Is that where you're from? I am missing 2 eyes, a face, both my hands, my arms and legs, a mouth, all my teeth. The body unfolds and unfolds and makes a human being. Everything I am not is walking across the street towards me and looks just like me. The same, the same, the same. He is another lion, the same bones, and exactly where I'm from. Soon, I think we will begin our slow orbit back to that day. Twin lions moving backwards in the same skin to begin again the work of being alive. My brother, walking across the street towards me, walks across the Milky Way. Before we were born, he stitched my eyelashes on. He rolled my knees into place. I attached his fingernails, brushed his hair back out of his eyes, and kissed him on the mouth. Our last moment alone together was our first moment. First spacewalk through the fluid universe, holding hands and floating out from the cords in our stomachs. Looking out into the wet room through our matted fur masks. The bright, almost invisible newborn hair smoothed down over everything. I am an astronaut, and my twin is an astronaut in our lion spacesuits. I won't stay here without him. Our afterlife is the actual world. That's what I remember. So I'll just read you one more poem. It's in 5 little sections. It's called Flies, from this book, Flies, and 50. I'll just say this thing, and I know my brother is tired of hearing it, but just to share with you guys, I have really, really boring dreams. Oh, like really boring. So here are a couple of my dreams. This would be a regular dream for me. In the dream, I wake up and I think, oh my God, are we out of milk? And then I go downstairs and then I open the refrigerator and there's milk. And in my dream, I'm like, oh, thank God. End of dream. Or I'll have a dream that, like Powell's Books, which is the best bookstore in the country and also in Portland, Oregon. I'll have a dream that I'm in the poetry section of Powell's, which I am often, and I'm like looking at a book like this, and I'm like, should I buy this? That's the end of my dream. Or now, this is a really open thing to say, but here was the dream I had last night. I recently sent a long poem to a magazine called the Paris Review. This is in real life. I'm waiting to hear from them. And in my dream, I get an envelope from the Paris Review. And I open it, and I read the letter, and they're like, "We'd be happy to take your poem." Which is frustrating because a lot of people I know, they have dreams where like, I was flying through the center of Mars and having sex with dinosaurs. And it's like, you were in your dream? And then I dream that I'm buying canned food at the store. But this poem, Flies, is based on, for this very short period of time, Matthew read a couple elegies. When Matthew's and my older brother, Darren, died, I suddenly, for like 2 months, had the most vivid dreams about flies. And sometimes they'd be like little flies, like regular flies you try to kill. And then other times they'd be like big flies that would be like, "Wake up, Michael." And like they would get me dressed, you know, and like, and so I had enough of those that I started to write about those. Thank you all for coming, by the way. Yeah. Flies. Then it's the flies that wake me up. It's the flies that gently get me out of bed and slip me into some clothes so I can walk around outside. In my body outside. In black and medicine green, in wings. I am tarred and feathered and walk around on their legs all day. It's the flies that sweetly call my name, so I'll know it's time, walking all over my face, whispering and eating shit. Put on your wings. I put on my wings. Slide into your legs. I slide into my legs. Medicine green, cathedral green, flying stained glass windows. My window wings smell like metal, and my legs are very thin and can fly too. You could thread a needle with them. Here we go. Through the eye of a needle, through all the 10,000 eyes, your mothers, your brothers, your sisters. It's my birthday again, for the last time for a year, again. 33 flies bring in a cake from the other room and set it on fire, singing the song my name sings. Shoo-wop, shoo-wop. No one's going to eat this cake. I don't even have any friends anymore. But the flies are my friends. Hold me up in the dark bar where I drink black beer, pitcher after pitcher, Indian Oceans, for my birthday of Indian ink. It's time to drag the family out again, so I'll know I'm alive and do a little dance. My sister's eyes are green, my brother's are green-black, my mother's. The flies will have to life flight me back home when I finish these encores and collect my flowers. I lost all my bets on the living and the dead for now. My brain wants out. It wants to roll around in the backyard. It wants to water the white roses. I love it here, and am never going to leave. The flies pull back the top sheet and warm up my side of the bed, pushing my hair back out of my eyes with their long thumbs. They smell like light in childhood, like trees. The flies behind my eyes start to drift off. They sound like static in the leaves. 10,000 eyes opening and closing at once. There, they begin to sing. The worst part is over. Thanks.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.